With that, we begin with the first session of the day under the urban infrastructure sector. The topic for the first session is wastewater treatment and sanitation. And we have some of the stalwarts working in the field who've joined us today to be part of this panel. May I please request our panel curator, Mr. Phelan, to join us on stage, please. Joe is the India Director of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. He's responsible for raising the profile and engagement of Indian businesses in the WBCSD and to scale up joint action by businesses in support of India's development. He currently oversees programs engaging more than 50 companies in action in India in areas such as energy, water, workplace sanitation, better cities, and more resilient agriculture. Thank you so much, Joe, for joining us today. May I now request the esteemed panelists to join us on stage, please. Our first panelist, Mr. Nitya Shah. Nitya, my colleague from ERM, he is a partner and the head of ERM's Gujarat operations. He has 16 years of professional experience in the field of water and wastewater process engineering and has worked on several wet infrastructure projects for both public and private sector clients in countries like the United States, Canada, and India. Thank you, Nitya, for joining us today. Our second panelist for the session, Dr. Shyni DS, sanitation specialist at Water for India. Ma'am, may I please request you to join us on stage? Thank you. And our third esteemed panelist for this session, Mr.Rakesh Sharma, Director and Co-owner, Boundless Environment Resource Solutions Private Limited. Thank you so much, sir. Joe, the stage is all yours.
Okay, so I think I'm audible now. Very good. Well, good morning. Good morning, and thank you for coming. And my name is Joe Phelan. I'm with the World Business Council, as Shramoy said. I have a colleague called Peter White who says that the world is run by those who turn up. So thank you for turning up. We have a very important issue to discuss this morning. And most importantly, we're seeking to uncover actionable intelligence that can go forward to the Prime Minister's office. So there's a responsibility and an opportunity for us. So I look forward over the next 45 minutes or so to us exploring these issues and coming up with something very specific and concrete that we can take forward. So here we are in India, in the middle of this amazing, vibrant, creative, hectic, wonderful place. And we're discussing wastewater treatment and sanitation because as India grows and as India thrives, it's essential that we're not held back by poor water management. We're not held back by not enough water. We're not held back by water that's too dirty. So what I want to do today is understand what are the things that we mustn't get wrong so that they don't hold us back, and what are the things that if we get right can really help us to thrive and grow. I think we're interested, first of all, in our people and how water affects people and people are affected by water. And I think we're also very interested in the context of cities and infrastructure and what the role of the private sector is, and all leading towards some actionable intelligence at the end. I'd like to ask the panelists to begin with some remarks with these things in mind. We didn't get a chance to discuss the order, but I wonder, Shiny ma'am, if we could start with you. Also within mind this focus on people, what have we got to get right? What are our priorities?
Good morning. Thanks for inviting me for this InfraConclave. Actually, last 5 years, I was in Swachh Bharat Mission Gramin in Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation. Recently moved on to Water for People. It's an international organization which looks for water, and I'm a sanitation specialist who focuses on solid waste management and liquid waste management in India. So I'll give a brief introduction of what is Swachh Bharat Mission, which is the Prime Minister's program, a dream come true program which we're working for the last 4 years with a vision of 2000 to make India Swachh by 2019. So there are 2 missions working, that is Swachh Bharat Mission Urban, which is looked after by Ministry of Urban Development, and Swachh Bharat Mission Gramin, which is looked after by Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation, which is the coordinating ministry for the sanitation, Swachh Bharat Mission. So the main what is Swachh Bharat mission,
Yeah,
because
please do. And
one of the components is wastewater treatment and
very
solid
good.
waste
And
management.
as you do, if you could also highlight if there are any indicators that the Prime Minister is looking to see progress on, that would be great.
Of course. The indicators under the Swachh Bharat mission is, one is there are 5 components which we are looking after. One is excreta management, and that is the main focus where we all talk about the toilet construction and everything. So one is excreta management, and that is by 2019 we look forward for individual household toilets and community toilets in India, both in urban as well as in rural areas. So since I was more focused in the 6 lakh villages in India, my more knowledge is more about the villages, rural areas in India rather than cities. So cities, because the major focus is solid and liquid waste management rather than the toilets which we talk about under the household toilets and the community toilets. And the second component under is the solid waste management. Third one is the liquid waste management. Fourth one is the major focus personal hygiene. And fifth component, that is which we now focus much more, is the behavior change in India. PCC, we talk about behavior change communication in India. If you talk about infrastructure, even though infrastructure available, our people are not using it. That is the major challenge in India we are facing. If we have more infrastructure on toilet, if we give them fund for constructing waste management facilities, but our people are not using it, and that is where the major challenge of Swachh Bharat mission, which we focuses on behavior change communication. And we are now doing all the triggering tools to make them use the infrastructure, to make them understand about using it, and that is where we are facing the challenge. And in case of liquid waste management, in rural areas, we focus on technologies which are low cost and which is sustainable. So, and that is also scalable. So we usually talk about technologies which are scalable, sustainable. So this is where pilots are always success. If we ask anyone to do a pilot is okay. But when we want to scale it or we want to make it sustainable, there is where we are finding difficulties. So that is where, as well as for solid waste management and liquid waste management, we are facing. If you talk about the waste management, Asia's biggest waste management plant was in Trivandrum, which is for the solid waste, which is 3,000 tons per day capacity. But it failed within 2 years. And after that, that is the major issue, which is resulting into the health as well as many. Now you can see, yesterday also there are 103 people died because of dengue in Kerala alone. That shows waste management is a major problem they are also facing. So there they are focusing on decentralized waste management issues. That is my waste, my responsibility. That is the slogan now used in Kerala actually. Because whoever generating waste, they have to take a responsibility of treating it. Because we go into major centralized options and we are failing in that. And everyone knows it's a chain of action, starts from generation, transportation, treatment, then disposal. If any one step fails, the whole system collapses. Similar in wastewater treatment. In Punjab, they were focusing on small sewer system for collecting water. Then the treatment came up, again it failed. And one more thing which we see in case of many of the rural areas is that the wastewater which is coming out of the septic tank getting mixed with the grey water, and it is going through the open drains in the cities as well as in the villages. So these are the major issues and challenges which we are facing. So I think my colleagues has to talk more about, so I'll intervene in between and give my ideas and everything.
Thank you very, very much. And at this point, my waste, my responsibility. I just want to ask for a show of hands in the room. If you think about the waste you produce, liquid, solid, think about the waste you produce. Do you know how that waste is taken away, disposed of, and goes back into the ecosystem? Who here knows how all of the waste they produce is disposed of completely? Not there's a person who takes it from your door or it goes down the toilet. Do you know how it's treated? Do you know how it's sorted, recycled, burnt, put into landfill? Who here can answer yes to that question? Fantastic. So 3 of you know the answer, so that's great. So I think we'll hear from the 3 of you later. and we can see what a percentage that is out of everyone in the room. So when we say my waste, my responsibility, which is very important, for 97% of us, we are not meeting that responsibility currently. So I'd like to hear from you shortly. Thank you, ma'am. Nitya, please give us your reflections on this.
I think it's a great slogan that has been taken over, my waste, my responsibility. And one thing that ma'am said, that when it comes to the large scale, it somehow fails. And the reason being, we don't have community getting engaged into these initiatives. And one way to look at this is to think of it from users' perspective. Show them what's in it for them. Think of it as a resource recovery option. So our wastewater treatment, and I'll talk more on the wastewater treatment, I believe that we should look at wastewater treatment as not a treatment, but as a resource recovery system. And we should think of it as something to produce good and of more value out of the treatment. So when I talk about the resource recovery, water being one of the major resources that we can achieve from, but we can also think of getting nutrients out of it. We can think of getting energy out of it. And there are so many examples around the world and in some parts in India where wastewater treatment plants are getting more and more self-sustainable on their energy use. So unless we show the people what is in it for them, they will never get engaged. And when we talk about clean cities, or when we think of clean cities, we visualize a city with clean roads, city with clean air, healthy water streams, and moreover, a healthy community. We never picturize a clean city with polluted air or untreated wastewater flowing into the natural water streams, or wastewater running down the streets. So in order to achieve all these things, we must start with the user. We must start engaging the community at large, and one way of doing it is to show them the value of doing wastewater treatment and adequate wastewater treatment. Sometimes doing more is not good. If we can live with a lesser quality water, treated water, we should adopt that. Yeah. We should not always aim to produce potable water out of wastewater. There are examples like in Singapore, PUB has developed a treatment plant which generates potable water out of sewage. And the brand is called New Water. So the one way they are encouraging is a public events like this. They distribute drinking water, which is a treated sewage, and they are bottled and they are distributed free, just to encourage people to use that water and reduce the consumption of the fresh water.
Thank you, Nitya. So, I mean, I think one really big point here is about optimization. So this idea of treating water, but only as much as we need to treat it, no more, but also seeing all of water as a resource. So, you know, we are well aware that we're very resource constrained, we're very space constrained, we're growing very fast, our population is growing very fast, so every decision we make has to be optimized. We need to see water as a resource and an input, whether back into water or into energy and so on. This optimization piece is very important. Sir, can I come to you? You know, what's possible?
Hello, good morning. I'm Rakesh Sharma. Actually, in my opinion, we are talking about water as resource, and we want to manage it. To manage water as a resource, the best principle I have learned is reduce, reuse, and recycle. First of all, we will have to educate people not to waste this resource so that we can generate lesser wastewater. That is the first and the foremost thing. Until unless we are able to achieve this target, we will not be, if we don't achieve it, then we will not be able to achieve the results we wanted for. So, misuse of water, I have seen in cities. I am staying in Delhi almost for the past 30 years now. People, you will find misusing this resource, using good quality water for washing of the cars, for horticulture, and so many things. So how to reduce? I am at my capacity, I am trying to educate people in my acquaintance, my social network. Please don't use water for washing your cars, floors, or at least reuse it for your cloth washing water. You can use it for horticulture, you can use it for floor mopping, this sort of. The first is to reduce. Then reuse. What do you mean by reuse? We have treatment facility at every places. Some functional, some non-functional, some are under capacity, some are overflowing. This sort of problem we always have. If we reduce our wastage, I'll give you one example. I have been to industry, their wastewater was almost 2000 kiloliters a day. I told them to go for water audit. Initially, they were reluctant, then they decided, okay, we'll go for it. And after the water audit, they were able to reduce their water consumption by 400 KL a day. 1600 KL water was saved, which was going to drain and creating an unnecessary load on their wastewater treatment system. The wastewater system, which was overburdened with this load, was not working to fullest capacity. After we reduced the load, it was working fine. And we were able to achieve almost 80% of the water to recycle. So the only 20% of water which was left, we gave them a system to use that water in their equipments after treatment. And that is how they were throwing water, almost 100 tankers a day water they were throwing out, the contaminated water. That has reduced to 1 or 2 tanker a day, and that is going to the treatment facility, not to any vacant places. So reduction of the wastewater is first thing, then reuse. We have infrastructure facility. Actually, we borrowed our system from Britishers. They designed a system where treatment facilities were centralized. The wastewater was going pumped to the centralized facility where it is treated and thrown into the river or disposed of. Similarly, we have drinking water system, potable water system. Again, it is centralized. The water is treated water is pumped to the household for the consumption. Over a period of time, because the system was designed say for a X amount of load, say 10 lakh people, the population has goes to almost 1 crore. So our drinking water distribution network has got a vacuum, and sewer water system is overflowing with the pressure. And to add to the injury, we installed, although it is not a regular thing, but we installed booster pumps to our installation, because drinking water is not available. So we installed a booster pump so that we can suck the water from the drinking water system. Both the pipelines are going under the ground, both are corroded. We have created a vacuum in the drinking water system, and the sewage water system, which is overflowing, again corroded, it is sucked into the drinking water system. We have contaminated our drinking water system with the sewage. So what is the solution for this? In my opinion, first of all, we will have to keep in mind the wastewater we are generating, we will have to create facility to reuse it. And in our country, in India, it is better if we have decentralized system. I will tell you why. Because that will reduce infrastructure load, larger infrastructure system load. And if you have small pockets and you are creating awareness into the to the people to use that wastewater, develop a system so that the treated wastewater is reused. And ultimately, we will have to decide we are not going to discharge any water, either treated or wastewater, to the surface water. Then only our problem will be sorted out. Like we are talking about smart city. Smart cities, everything has to be used smartly. Until unless we adopt this principle of reduce, reuse and recycle, we will not be able to sustain that system. You can have a system, you can buy any equipment, but until you are able to sustain it, it is not going to pay you back. That is what I feel. I think everybody here will agree with me. We will have to create some decentralized structures, creating awareness for reduction of the waste and using the treated water facilities. Like I started my work with Ganga Action Plan in 1986. We were studying the impact of mass bathing on the river Ganga. The results we have achieved were alarming at that time also. After that, we tried to create infrastructure, we invested a lot of money. But the problem is, the treated water again is going to the river. Now, in case of equipment failure, it is going to the river, it is continuously going, because we don't have facility to reuse that treated water. So, we will have to develop infrastructure to use that treated water, to use that as a resource, not as a burden. We will have to use that as a resource. Then only we will be able to achieve our goals, achieve our, say, target of smart cities, target of using that infrastructure quite wisely. And one more thing I want to add, I heard a quote at some time ago, the Third World War will be fought on water. And I feel, because when 30 years back I started with water, I never thought of going for this bottled water or a fight over drinking water in the cities. Today we are seeing it. Every colony, people, they are for drinking water, they are queuing up almost for 8 hours a day, because drinking water is not available, and whatsoever is available, it is contaminated. So we will have to think out of the box to see how we could use this wastewater as a resource.
Very good. So very clear, this concept of wastewater as a resource come out from both of you, reduce, reuse, recycle, and then this decentralized infrastructure, moving away from centralized into decentralized infrastructure, and with behavior change alongside it. I want to take some questions from the floor. We'll come back to the panel. I'm going to start by asking at least one of you who knows where your waste goes to tell us that story, please, so that we can learn from it. But I'd also like to hear from everyone else in the room, you know, if you want to challenge anything that anyone said, if you want to pick up on anything anyone said, but also if we can start looking now, we're aware this is a critical issue for us. If you live in Delhi, you may have got chikungunya, you may have got dengue, which is directly related to water management. You may have got typhoid, which again is to do with sanitation. We know the numbers on infant mortality. We know the drastic impact on our GDP that poor water management has. This is known. So what we need to do, and the Prime Minister is aware, what we need to do is give him some pointers that can turn his vision into something that can be executed at city level. So, you know, suggestions on indicators, on models, on governance, and so on, I think we'd really like to hear. So you've been warned. That's what I'm looking for. Can I ask one of the three people, you're in a line, you can't hide now, to tell us the story of your waste? You know, my waste, my responsibility. I'd like to hear that story, please. If we can get a microphone to someone in the audience. Yes, please.
So I'll speak very simplistically. You know, waste has a journey from my house. Somebody collects it. Somebody typically would be people from your RWAs and people who have organized, you know, contractors to handle your waste, pick it up from your house, take it to a collection place or a dhalao where the waste gets collected. You know, typically the waste, the local municipal authorities get it picked up, and they have a fleet of vehicles that pick up this waste, take it to a center where there is it's collected in a larger mass. there would be potentially some kind of segregation happening there, and there is an involvement of formal, informal, a lot of people, what you call rag pickers, a lot of that happens there, and then a lot of your so-called, waste disappears at that time. You don't know whether it's going in for further treatment or it is being taken away for recycling in informal sectors. But then, and the rest of it then goes into for treatment or for, in landfills, or it's burnt, which is not allowed, but it is burnt. So finally it goes into a journey where some of it gets recycled, some of it is burnt, some of it is put into landfills for long-term, waste storage. That's the simplistic journey. I just wanted to say that it's intriguing that this issue is such a fundamental issue in our lives, and still some very the biggest resistance comes from people living in homes. And I'm just giving you an example that recently I live in New Friends Colony, and there was a notification by the RWA saying from now on you have to start segregating your waste. Just the mental torture of having 3 buckets in your kitchen, and getting the persons who work in your house to get that thing started. And even when it got started, I mean, the fact that the person who's collecting the waste collected it even if it was not sorted. So after a week, by just sheer inertia, it goes back to that one bucket, and you have to constantly. So at some stage, the behavioral aspect at your home, but somebody is not holding you to task. The day your waste doesn't collect it for 2 days, every household will want to do something, because collect waste in your house is something every family feels iffy about. But it gets collected, even though it was supposed to be not to. So somewhere, each chain, as you're saying, that each chain aspect can completely derail the system, so that every chain has to do that as an obligation as per law, or as well as an obligation to manage waste better.
Thank you. Sir? And I just want to say, we can imagine the best case scenario with our waste, but let's also imagine the worst case scenario with our waste. So I lived in Mumbai for some time, and I used to look at the rubbish along the railway tracks, and I used to smell the sewage as I crossed the creek. And then one day I realized, maybe that's my rubbish that's scattered along the railway tracks, and maybe that's my waste that I can smell as I cross the creek, because actually I had no idea. And we can imagine the ingenuity of Indians and that pursuit for every rupee in a piece of plastic or piece of paper, but we can also imagine, the failure of us as people. I take 100 rupees a week to collect this rubbish and I dump it on the train tracks. My job is over. So, let's be real. Sir?
Yeah, it's almost the same story. The only thing is that some time back I realized that, okay, there are also regulations that doesn't allow you that if you are in the Delhi, the waste cannot actually be taken to another state. And that's why you are having a problem that where you're going to dispose it off, whether you're going to burn it and all. And in Delhi also, they are looking at new technologies in terms of, there were 2-3 points that Nina already mentioned, that the waste is considered to be very clean in India, the solid waste. And there is not much enough waste that has high oxidation value. And even if you want to generate electricity out of it, okay, it is going to be, there are not enough people who are coming, and that requires a lot of technology. The second thing is there is a bigger role for basically the rag pickers and all, because they are collecting it at different levels. Especially the place that they call transfer station, the next stop after they have collected from your house to the pickup points and then to the transfer station. That is the place in between that, okay, lot of rag pickers, and that is also a occupational health and safety issue. We have heard in many of the cases that there is not enough involvement of people who could properly guard them in terms of the uses of the PPEs and all. And also basically at these sites where where the final disposal is undertaken, the proper management doesn't happen. There is leachate that is happening over there. There are people who are having access to, I've had experience of basically going in Delhi and then in Mumbai near to Devnar and then in Hyderabad, and you could hear incidents about basically people just walking over there, and some of them because there is fire within, and suddenly people have lost their lives, like 5, 6 people just burnt directly. So there are a lot of issues altogether. And it also varies from city to city. So I know that, okay, what is happening in Delhi, but I also know that what is happening in 800 or 1,000 towns across the country, where the municipal corporation doesn't have the capacity to hire basically these private authorities, private companies who could basically manage your waste for a transportation of certain amount of waste every day. So if you don't have the capacity and you don't have the quantum, and if nobody is interested in that management, it becomes a difficult issue.
Thank you. Okay, so what I'd like to do, we've got a question there, sir. Microphone is coming.
Yeah, hi. When we say my waste, my responsibility, as an end user, see, if I generate waste, I cannot treat it. So what do we mean by my responsibility? As ma'am mentioned, my responsibility is that I segregate the waste so that organic waste goes, in one place, plastic waste goes to one place, steel and metallic waste goes to one place. Because if we see the entire value chain of, waste generation till final disposal, 50 to 60% cost is in waste collection and waste transportation. So she raised a very important point that government and maybe NGOs, they have to come together and maybe have some policy, some kind of regulation so that this aspect is taken care of, because this is one of the most crucial aspects. Now coming to other aspects, for example, solid waste or wastewater treatment. Now in cities we see that mostly people are living in gated communities, apartments. So there are regulations that each township or each island has to have its own sewage treatment plant. Sir mentioned a very important point of 3R, which is reduce, reuse and recycle and reuse. So it has to be seen, because I've seen that in many big townships, what happens actually, that from your home, the waste is transported to some lower basement, and there a transporter comes, he collects the waste of whole township, and in some hinterland of your city, it is dumped. And there is no scientific design of landfill. It is just, you are dumping the waste, and as people, as gentleman mentioned, that due to this, there is leachate. Due to that, there is, NOx and sulfur dioxide, so many carbon monoxide, those gases are there. And people who are living in, beside those areas, they are having a lot of health hazards. So it's a very complex problem, and we have to, see it holistically and involve all the stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, how do we do this? So, this is a complex systemic challenge. It goes from individual users to colonies to industrial water use to municipal level planning. It's about the whole integrated sustainable water management, clearly. Now, how does that get actioned? Through policies, through indicators, through models. How do we involve stakeholders in that? How do we ensure that people are included in that process and businesses? So I'm interested to hear from the panel and from you in the room what's going to help turn this vision and this analysis that we're all aware of, and the solutions that companies like yours have, and the insights that institutions like yours have, how we take that forward. Does anyone on the panel want to kick us off?
I think for any sanitation system to be successful, we need to look at it as 6 major components. First and foremost, as I said, are the users. We have to have their participation. Second is policies. We need to have policies that encourages users' participation and effectiveness of the entire system. We need financial institutions to support the fundings and costs to cover that system. We need educational institutions to spread the awareness, to share the knowledge, and also we need human resources to make that system work. And we obviously need the know-how of technology. What is good, what is adequate, what is required. We don't want to go overboard, or we don't want to undertreat something so that it can have an impact on the entire system. So these 6 components, if we look at them as an integrated thing, then obviously I believe that we can have a successful sanitation system in place.
Actually, do you hear me? Actually, the first of all thing, we will have to educate people, involve all stakeholders to achieve our goals. I'll give you one example. In nowadays, everybody, I think, will be they are using RO system at their home. How many people are using RO system at their for drinking water? I think so many people. When RO technology came to Delhi, came to first time in Delhi, I got one system and I got it installed at my home. And when I got this water checked, the treated water of RO, I was alarmed because the salt content in the water was reduced alarmingly. Secondly, the wastewater generated by an individual RO system is very high. Say if you are generating 50 liters of water a day, 50 liters of water is going to the waste. Now, what is the significance of this? 50 liters of water, wastewater from a house, say, and 1000 liters, from 1000 houses it will become 50,000 liters, and for 5 lakh household it will become 2.5 MLD. This much water, wastewater we are generating on our infrastructure, additional load. So what is the solution? Solution is, don't follow any technology for just blindly. See what is the quality of the resource available and how best you can use it. Now the involvement of the government and the other stakeholders is to educate people that this is your resource and this is the best technology to use it for your requirement. That will reduce the load and that will give you a better product for your use, which is appropriate for your body, your system, your immune system. The next thing is, as I said earlier, the water which is treated, we are investing lot of money to run that system, to have capital investment to have that system. Until unless we get 100% desired result from the system, we should not be satisfied. The treated resource should be reused and nobody should be allowed to discharge water, wastewater, either treated or untreated, into the land. One more thing, one more important thing. There is one more resource which we are forgetting and which is again creating a lot of load on our system. It's a problem also. Rainwater harvesting. In Delhi, government has made it mandatory to have rainwater harvesting system when you go to the MCD or any agency to have your drawing approved. You will have to have a plan for rainwater harvesting, and people just start doing a eyewash. If you have a proper rainwater harvesting system, I have a rainwater harvesting system at my house. It is working for the past 7 years beautifully. I am getting it cleaned almost every alternate year. The advantage, my groundwater level at my place, I have never had a problem. One more thing. In the flush water, I am using groundwater, not the treated water which is being supplied by the authorities. I have reduced the cost of that treated water on my budget and reduce that additional burden onto the system. If we save 100 liters of water, just treated water in a day, I think we will be able to achieve very good results. Reduce, reuse and recycle.
I think just to add to what you said on the RO, I totally agree. Actually, I have similar example of an industry who was my client, and they were drawing water from the ground and passing it through multi-stage RO system, generating huge quantity of reject. When I looked at their system, and they were having problems with the reject treatment. And when I looked at their system and I asked what purposes they are using their RO permeate, and it turned out that they were treating it to such a high degree, which was not essential. So ultimately, it turned out that their load on the RO was curtailed back, and it was reduced by 50%. And they started blending the groundwater with the RO permeate and using it for the system that they were required to. So it is, what you said is absolutely right. It is not just use of technology, but you have to be smart, and you have to be, you should focus on what is required.
I would like to add to this about regarding policy and guidelines regarding this. There are enough policies at national level, state level regarding water, wastewater, as well as solid waste management. And we have enough act, law, everything. But enactment of that is what is creating field level issues and problems. For example, when I joined ministry, my first assignment was to make a law on littering. Because we have a behavior of littering around. So how to make a law for that? So I worked with the Ministry of Law for starting making law against littering. So then the other suggestions came up is that first we will provide infrastructure, then we will talk about making a law so that people can have an infrastructure where they can put their waste. Then we can say that, come up with a law against it. So it's still in the process only. So then the next one, I have to say, my responsibility is that we have to be, as Sir said, should be decentralized for water as well as wastewater. So we focus at household level onwards, how to treat and manage the waste that is generated. At a household level, it is only 1.2 to 1.5 kg per waste that is generated in a household level in solid waste case. So if we segregate, we can treat the degradable waste at household level itself. So we have to give only out our non-degradable waste to the vendors who are coming up. And this degradable waste also, in what we are doing in household level is composting, vermicomposting, then we are also providing biogas plants to the household level, 0.5 m cube to 1.1 m cube, 1.5 m cube based on the quantity of the waste generated at the level. So decentralized treatment systems can treat the waste at the source itself rather than going outside. And as usual, we talk about that NIMBY attitude of us, not in my backyard. Our house are the place where we have to be very clean. And these public places are not always ours. So that is why the wastewater, most of the households, the wastewater goes out into the drains outside from their house. So in rural areas, what we focus is every house should have a sock pit to treat the water. Otherwise, there should be a covered drain to take it outside into the common collection system. So that much awareness, that much guidelines, that much policies are completely discussed for the last 4 years. And what I said is the behavior changes where we are challenge phases. So everyone should take it as our own responsibility of treating our own waste. That is what I initially started with. Thank you.
Thank you. Some very important points here, including this one about the appropriateness of the solution. Sometimes we get into the mindset of every colony must have a sewage NSTP, or every city must have an RO solution, or whatever it is. And often they're not the right solutions for the context. So I think a key point is much more critical thinking and defining the problem and identifying the right solution for each context, domestic, municipal, and so on. It's very important. We have about 10 minutes left, and I'd like to see if there's any more questions. Yes, ma'am? And there's also an example of behavior change that I'd like to pick up from my colleague in a minute too.
So, I feel that we have a very unique situation that we are talking about right now, where we are on a sort of a pivot. On one side of the pivot, we have, international records telling us that there's a child dying every 5 seconds in India because of water contamination issues. And, India is going to become the most populous country in the world in maybe another 15 years from now. So that's on one side of the pivot. And on the other side, we have things like 80% of India is going to be reconstructed by 2030. And there's an exponential rise in the middle class population, their income levels and everything. So on one side it's positive and on one side is negative. And I'm just trying to understand over here from any of the esteemed panelists, that do you think using this platform that we have today, where we are talking about actionable intelligence and we're trying to come up with those real enablers that can be, stimulating actionable intelligence for smart and sustainable infrastructure, can the problems that we have really be used as enablers for the future? Can we take them as enablers for actionable intelligence?
And if so, how?
Actually,
sorry, let's just check 1 second. Are there any further questions from the floor, and then we can do them in one go? Ma'am.
I had a very specific question to do with Swachh Bharat mission. I was actually reading an article yesterday about manual scavenging of human waste. It was apparently banned in India by a regulation that was passed in the 1970s. So we are not supposed to have manual scavenging of human waste, but it is still apparently practiced in India. And there are a few lakh women in India belonging to a certain caste who still practice that. There are significant health issues that come back. And it appears that, they're also paid very low as compared to men who are if they were in such jobs. So I had a question about whether this has been picked up under the Swachh Bharat mission. Is this already something that is known to the government? Has this been in discussions? Is there any target around it? Because it seems like an issue which is a social issue. It is to do with gender inequality, to do with women. It is a caste issue, but also about health. Of women being impacted, and also, of course, grossly about a regulation that was passed in 1970s not being followed. So has this been in discussions?
Thank you. Any more? Yes, sir. What I'd like to do is just take final set of questions, and then we can make some final remarks addressing those. There's a question at the front here.
Hello, yeah. So my question is, basically there has been a lot of discussion that has happened yesterday, and also the general discussion that has been happening in terms of the smart cities and other things that are happening in terms of urban infrastructure development and all. There is also a growing understanding that, okay, by, say, for example, another 15 years, 20 years, the number of population basically shifting to the urban areas, it could be 35%, 40%. The figures vary. And there was another major program from the government of India, JNNURM, and which was looking at building the capacities of the city, okay, 60, 100, total number of cities in different phases were selected. As you rightly mentioned in the beginning, that there is a problem basically of the drainage water and basically your water, the pipeline for drinking water, it's basically running parallel. And this is a problem in many places. When we are talking about these smart cities and all, okay, and when we are talking about infrastructure, why is this water and this wastewater treatment, or basically the drinking water quality and all, that is not getting into the core of the infrastructure debate? Or even in terms of implementation, why basically while all the municipal corporation are thinking about municipal bonds, they are talking about all these hubs, business hubs, everything, why this water thing is actually not getting the kind of attention that it deserved?
Thank you. Any more questions? I'd like to ask, we heard about behavior change in education, and if I can ask Deepa Mago to explain about this Wash in the Workplace pledge as a way that companies can impact the understanding of their employees about sanitation. So we know we have education programs, we do outreach and public health communication. There are millions of people who spend a long time inside companies with strong HR programs. Can you just explain this initiative and how it educates people about sanitation?
Sure, thanks, Joe. So this is about a very specific initiative called WASH at the Workplace. And this is a pledge that WBCSD, so we both are from this organization called the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, which is a membership-based organization, has about 200 business members, large business members globally. And so they started a pledge some more than 3 years back to actually, as a very concrete tool, and also a communication statement to actually say that we will ensure our employees at their workplace will get a complete access to safe water, sanitation and hygiene. Now we believe that is very critical, not just in the global conversations but also important for India, because this is the first thing that the companies can and should do, is to make sure that their employees get 100% access. And of course it is to do with behavior change, because if, it's a mindset issue within companies, and if it is translated in a manner that it is communicated to all employees, it needs a strong behavior change, but also strong systems in place for actually ensuring good access. And one effect that should ideally come out of this effort is that if at the workplace employees are ensured good access, then the behavior gets translated to their families. It gets, it's communicated to the families as well. So we believe this is a very strong tool. And if you would like to know more about it, please do reach us. But this is something that we miss also in conversations in India, because we think about building toilets outside of the industrial locations, trying to fulfill social responsibility commitments. But how many of us are actually making sure that our employees get an access to safe water, sanitation, and hygiene? Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm now going to ask the panel to make some concluding remarks. If you could respond to some or all of these questions. We had this question about water and sanitation being at this critical junction between the terrible health impacts of poor sanitation on the one hand, and on the other hand, this demographic dividend that India is now in the middle of. The second question was about this issue of human waste sorting that still goes on. And the third one was about all the water that falls in cities, and how we can collect that and integrate that into our infrastructure and so on. I think I got that right. So if we start with you and work on.
I'll take up the water issues. What is, for a smart city, what is the basic requirement is? The first requirement is we should have smart people for smart cities. Those who think in terms of using their resource to the best possible way. And how it is that possible? How much you are generating, what quality you are generating, what quality you are consuming, and how much quantity you are consuming. If you have an account for this, you are smart enough. If you don't have an account for this, you will not be able to sustain the infrastructure you have generated. So in smart city, the important issue is you will have to monitor the quantity and the quality of the resource at each level, and use the infrastructure available to the best possible extent so that the wastage is minimum. It's an infrastructure conclave. There are not many people from cement industry. I refer it's a matter of research. If we can use the wastewater in construction sites, what is the impact on the settleability and the life of the structure if you use wastewater? Because if we can use that resource, it will save a lot of energy, lot of effort if we can use that resource, or if with some minor treatment or something like that. Like recently I have heard the solid waste, they are planning to use it for construction of the highways. Although it will have its own complication, but the generated waste, solid waste, if it can be put to some use, two problems are sorted out. One is the dump yard problem, and secondly, the treatment problem, recycle problem. Same is with the wastewater. If you can find out the waste, like treated wastewater, we can use it for horticulture, we can use it for washing, we can use it for cleaning, we can use it for floor cleaning, And at some places it is being used even for the flushing. For smart city, if we can have a separate flush system in the houses, where we can use recycled water. In that case, we will be reducing load on the drinking water system, and the treatment facility will be used to the maximum possible extent.
Thank you. Thank you. Sir, thank you. Very good. Ma'am, and we just have a couple of minutes. So.
Okay, that's what even I'm looking at the time. It's only 7 minutes left. So I'll first answer for the manual scavenging question. Government of India started discussions this even before Swachh Bharat came, because it was an earlier issue and it was more prevalent in UP, Bihar side rather than South Indian states. Because in 1950, soon after our independence itself, in many of the government it prohibited this, many of the state governments. But still, you can see that in Bihar and UP. But in official records, we say no. But still, Government of India and everyone knows it's still prevalent. Even in Shah district, last month when I visited, I saw that. So Government of India is funding state government to convert insanitary latrines into sanitary latrines. And every month we have to give how many latrines converted into sanitary latrines to the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. So that is really funded by Government of India and changing the people to convert their latrines into sanitary latrines. So it will take time, but it will surely reach to that point where all the insanitary latrines will be converted to sanitary latrines. And every month it is monitored, both from the state government and from the central government itself. So that is one thing. And the other thing, what ma'am suggested is 2030, which we are looking for as a health, sanitary India. Of course we can. If each and every one changes their attitude, behavior, and we feel responsible, we will be able to change and make Swachh India within 2019 itself, because changes are happening. We know that people are aware. We are all are educated, literate people, almost everyone is aware. We have to be conscious now. There is difference between awareness and consciousness. We are aware. We have to work towards now much more conscious activities to make it very active. We know many things, but we are not practicing. That is which from the beginning I was talking about. Now, because of time limit, thank you.
Thank you.
Any interaction, I'll be here to interact with you also.
Thank you, ma'am. Nitya, just some final remarks.
Yeah, I think I'll touch base on what Manish's question was, why wet infrastructure is not given due importance when it comes to smart cities. It's very human, I feel, that we focus or we tend to focus on something that we can see. Most of the wet infrastructure, be it water pipelines or sewage networks or stormwater drains, they are underground, they are hidden. We don't see them. So it's very easy for us to ignore it and just don't focus on it because people will not see them. So when it comes to smart cities, I believe that it's not, smart city is not something that looks smart. A city that uses its resources smartly, that's a smart city to me. A city that is a water smart city, a city that is an energy smart city, that's a smart city to me. So I think with that, I'll just cut it short for me.
Thank you very much. So really appreciate the questions from the floor, really appreciate the expert knowledge on the panel. I think we're clear this is a critical issue, which if we don't fix, it's already hurting us and will hold us back. I think the most important thing is this mindset of water as a resource and integrated water management. I think there's a very strong point about appropriate solutions and not getting locked into one particular technology, but designing solutions that are right for the context we're in. Another point that came up very strongly was involving all stakeholders, at the design, the planning and design stage, at the build and at the implementing stage. And I think the private sector has a much greater role to play up front in helping to plan and design solutions for cities, and users are really important in that stage too, and also in this operation stage. And I think as well a mindset where we know we need to measure specific units and so on, but let's also hold people to account and set ourselves targets on the quality of life that these services deliver. So we're moving away from a kind of input-output framework into, are we healthy, do our cities work, and then we'll design the right solutions accordingly. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand back to Shrymoyi to close the session.
I thank you all. Joe, and all the esteemed panelists on stage, and to all the participants for such insightful discussions. Thank you very much. May I please request Shri Animesh Dasgupta to felicitate the dignitaries on the dais. A huge round of applause for all of us. Thank you.